You lose that balance when you remove the single most psychoactive component from the plant and use that as a pharmaceutical.
I've used Marinol on some patients selectively. I've not had any problem with Marinol.
Dr. Voth says while he's not overly impressed with Marinol, he would rather have patients take a pill. He says telling a patient to smoke an illegal plant is substandard medicine.
I treat a lot of sick patients with all sorts of different pain and neuropathic disorders and cancer, etc. And I cannot think of one circumstance in 27 years of active practice that I've had to say, well, it's time for you to smoke dope. I just haven't. And that includes terminal patients and hospice patients.
Anyone who says that, we have adequate treatments for all of the conditions for which marijuana is purported to have some effect, I don't think that is a correct statement. I think the fact is that we have a lot of difficult to treat conditions, and there may be a niche or a place for the cannabinoids with some of those conditions.
Oncology social worker Wendy Gwenner agrees. She's personally seen patients who don't get adequate relief from the anti-nausea drugs. And when it comes to getting patients to eat,
it is far and away the best medication that we have for chronic wasting and for increasing appetite in cancer patients.
There's probably nothing that works as well for appetite stimulation that we have as marijuana.
But Dr. Hensoldt says cannabis does have one side effect that certain patients don't like, namely the high.
Most of the side effects I worry about with patients are really the euphoria and the altered sense of consciousness that people get, and whether they'll tolerate that or not.
Generally, you'd consider a high as an adverse effect. So that adverse side effect for people who don't want to be high is really a problem.
For other patients, though, the high could be part of the therapeutic effect. A 1999 U.S. Institute of Medicine report on marijuana found the drug's anti-anxiety and sedative effects could be a benefit.
I can't convince myself that the psychoactive part doesn't play a part. If they feel good, that's terrific.
But does feeling good lead to addiction?
Absolutely. Marijuana is habituating, addictive, whatever you want to call it.
Dr. Voth says marijuana has about the same addictive potential as alcohol. The 1999 government report found marijuana was slightly less addictive than alcohol, with 9% of all users experiencing addiction. And marijuana does not have the extreme physical withdrawal symptoms that alcohol and other drugs do.
Potential for withdrawal is really minimal because the cannabinoids are stored in fat, so that if you stop using marijuana abruptly, it still leaches out from fat over a number of days, so you don't get a precipitous withdrawal.
Regardless of the mild withdrawal symptoms, Dr. Voth believes marijuana's side effects and its addictive potential are just a few of the factors that make it unattractive for drug companies to research.
I think it's very unlikely that marijuana will ever make it through the FDA. It's the fact that you're smoking dope, that you're smoking a plant. You're smoking something with 488 substances in it. So there's the rub. Schedule I is a side issue. It may chill things a little, but it's really that you're looking at smoking dope as a medication.
Dr. Voth is not the only one concerned about smoking. The 1999 Institute of Medicine report says smoked marijuana is a crude THC delivery system that also delivers harmful substances.
There's a lot of things that have hit the literature that have talked about head and neck tumors, for instance, oral tumors, lung cancers even.
The Institute of Medicine found that marijuana smoke can deposit up to 4 times the amount of tar in the lungs of a cannabis smoker as a tobacco smoker. Studies have also shown that marijuana smoke contains higher concentrations of the same carcinogens found in cigarette smoke. While scientists are concerned these factors may lead to lung cancer, they still have not found definitive proof, and patient Point Hatfield says smoking is worth the risk.
The thing about smoking the marijuana is it's immediate. You don't wait 20 minutes or half an hour or whatever. It's immediate. And for me, immediate relief was a blessing.
When you smoke cannabis, by the way, the peak concentration in the bloodstream occurs in 2.5 minutes.
When it goes through your lungs, it goes into the right side of the heart, into the left side of the heart, and then right up to the brain.
Most people prefer the inhalation method because they can better titrate when the effect comes on, how long it lasts.
Dr. Grant says until someone comes up with a fast-acting inhaler, smoking may be their best option.
I'm not sort of in the camp of people who say, well, I grant you marijuana may work, but it's absolutely unacceptable because it's smoked. I don't think that's right.
Do you worry about patients smoking?
I don't. I look at the cost benefit. The cost of having untreated cancer would be far outweigh whatever carcinogens might be introduced to the lungs.
Even Irvin Rosenfeld, a patient who smokes 10 to 20 marijuana cigarettes a day, doesn't waste any time worrying about the smoke.
No.
Why not?
First of all, I have over 200 tumors in my body that could go malignant. I should live so long as to die of lung cancer. Okay.
A 2006 lung cancer study funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse gives Rosenfeld even more to smile about. Researchers unexpectedly found that chronic, heavy marijuana smokers not only had no increased risk of developing lung cancer, but they actually had a decreased risk.
Marijuana contains anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and probably anti-cancer compounds in it.
This is where the complexity of the plant is both a blessing and a curse. With dozens of cannabinoids and hundreds of other compounds, it's difficult to pinpoint the source of the beneficial effects found in the smoking study.
There are challenges in doing research on something that has, 150 different chemicals in it.
Critic Dr. Eric Voth believes the true medical potential of cannabis lies in targeting some of those chemicals, not smoking the entire plant.
There are elements in the cannabinoids and various cannabinoids that have a lot of positive effect and very little addictive or high causing effects.
Scientists have managed to isolate and focus attention on one of those. It's called cannabidiol, and next to THC, it's one of the most abundant cannabinoids in the plant.
CBD is cannabidiol, which is another cannabinoid like the main psychoactive ingredient, but instead of getting people high, CBD seems to be a very potent anti-inflammatory and analgesic. So it relieves pain and decreases inflammation.
But what I'll
Judged anti-inflammatory and analgesic. So it relieves pain and decreases inflammation.
But what I'll do is I'll just kind of put the stove on low. I'll spoon out a little bit of the canna butter, about that much as a dose is worth for the night. And I'll put it into the pan and just let it melt down.
CBDs seem to help my seizures. I'm not using it to get any psychological effects off of it. I'm just eating the butter raw with bread, so warmed up.
And how often do you take that? Once a day, twice a day?
At night, right before bed. I used to be on approximately 14 different prescriptions, and I would still have up to 12 seizures a day. I used to take 2 handfuls of pills, no more.
While this 27-year-old epilepsy patient is relieved to be taking medical marijuana, she's considerably more anxious about showing her face and has requested we conceal her identity.
Why do you not want to show your face?
I am not comfortable showing my face because of all the discrimination that has already happened.
She says both she and her husband have lost jobs when she spoke openly about her use of marijuana as a medicine.
But the fact of the matter is, somebody has to speak up or nobody will hear these stories.
She chose to tell us her story in her artist's studio. Here she creates much happier works than she did even a few years ago, when her self-portraits plainly showed the toll epilepsy had taken since she was diagnosed at 15.
I've taken pretty much every anti-epileptic on the market, and some with a little bit more success than others. Some of the medicines I was on had nothing to do with epilepsy, and the doctors put me on them to help me sleep or to help with my anxiety issues. The seizures were so bad I needed to be sedated heavily to sleep. The depression gets worse the more you're sedated.
Despite the constant seizures and depression, she graduated high school and was accepted into a private women's college to study psychology and fine arts.
The seizures were so intense by my early 20s that I couldn't stay in class. And as the stress of exams would come closer, that would trigger seizures.
She had to withdraw from college just a handful of credits short of graduation. The seizures were so bad and the medication so debilitating that getting a job wasn't even an option. She was bedbound for years while the epilepsy ruled her life.
My husband would have to call me, 25 times a day from work just to make sure I was still breathing okay. I could not shower by myself because if I slipped and fell, it only takes a half inch to drown. So we were living on pins and needles with me having that many.
That's when she decided to move to a state with a medical marijuana program. She had read stories about its potential to treat epilepsy, and she wanted legal access to it.
How did that impact your seizures?
They started slowing down. I had to build it up in my system, and it wasn't until I started ingesting it that they really stopped completely.
The potential of the CBDs in marijuana to mitigate epileptic seizures is not new. Scientists who put together the 1982 U.S. Institute of Medicine report found substantial evidence from animal studies to indicate that cannabinoids are effective in blocking seizures and that there is strong support for further investigation into the utility of CBD in human epilepsy. The subsequent 1999 Institute of Medicine report was less enthusiastic, saying the solid scientific evidence still isn't there yet, and it was unlikely to be a fruitful area for drug research.
I'm not waiting for the FDA approval to come through. I know how it affects my body, and that's one thing that I've learned through taking prescription drugs all these years. I have to know how this stuff is going to affect me, not what somebody else says it does for them.
Not only has it completely stopped her seizures, but she says something in the plant works for her anxiety, depression, and insomnia too. So she sees the scientifically undesirable cornucopia of substances in the plant as a benefit, not a detriment.
The fact is it works. It works better than anything I've ever tried, any pill I've ever taken.
The cannabinoids have multiple actions. It's not just on pain, or in her case, maybe anti-epileptic action, but for many people, they have a sedative and anti-anxiety effect and so forth.
I'm a cancer doctor, and I often suggest to my patients that they consider marijuana for their loss of appetite, nausea, pain, depression, and insomnia. It's one medicine they could use instead of 5.
Critics of medical marijuana are highly skeptical of claims it can treat just about everything. How is it possible that one plant has the potential to treat so many different ailments? Intriguing answers started appearing in the early 90s when researchers pinpointed receptors in the brain and the body that bind with the cannabinoids. Receptors can be described as locks on the surface of a cell, and when the correct key binds with the correct lock or receptor, it opens the door and delivers messages. Sometimes the message is that the body is feeling pain. Other times the message may be that there's an invader and the immune system must attack.
Scientists located 2 receptors, cannabinoid receptors, one called the CB1 receptor, mainly in the brain, and the other is the CB2 receptor, which is mainly in cells of the immune system.
The CB1 receptors are extremely abundant in the brain, but they're also found all over the body in the major organs, the heart, the liver, kidneys, and pancreas. After finding all these locks that accepted the cannabis key, researchers made the next big discovery. The human body makes its own cannabinoids, called endocannabinoids.
We have this whole elaborate system where we have these receptors in our brain and in our immune system, and these circulating chemicals that we produce ourselves that really are very, very similar to the chemicals in the marijuana plant.
The only difference is that the endocannabinoids that we produce are in such small quantities, and they're also rapidly degraded, so that therefore we are not high all the time, or we don't have that feeling of euphoria all the time.
Dr. Prakash Nayagarkati is a professor of pathology and microbiology at the University of South Carolina. For the last decade, he's been doing research on what's become known as the human endocannabinoid system.
The precise functions of the endocannabinoid system is still being understood, actually.
The discovery of the system, however, is already revealing clues that have bolstered the personal stories of relief. The areas of the brain that control nausea and vomiting, chronic pain, and epileptic seizures all have cannabinoid receptors.
What do these things do? Well, in the brain and the nervous system, the cannabinoid system seems to exert kind of a dampening effect. It's kind of an internal, I like to think of it as a neurological shock absorber.
And when they looked in other animals, they found these receptors were present in basically all animal species. So why do dogs and monkeys, for example, need to have cannabinoid receptors?
They must be playing a very critical role in trying to maintain some of the physiological functions.
The whole development of the fact that there are cannabinoid receptors in endocannabinoids has really given drug companies and pharmaceutical investigators a lot of opportunity to try to manipulate the body's own cannabinoid system.
That's because now they can create synthetic drugs that target the receptors instead of taking chemicals from the plant. By avoiding the plant, they get around the controversies and complications of its Schedule I status. A search of the U.S. patent database reveals numerous large pharmaceutical companies have filed recent patents claiming their cannabinoid receptor drug has the potential to treat almost everything: multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, rheumatoid arthritis, Tourette's, epilepsy, heart disease, obesity, various mental illnesses, and the holy grail of medicine, a cancer cure.
We feel that these cannabinoids give us an opportunity to study their functions, and see how we can exploit them, how we can manipulate these cannabinoids and the receptors to find cures for a large number of diseases currently in which there is particularly no cure.
As an immunologist, Dr. Niagara Cotty and his researchers at the University of South Carolina are exploring the impact cannabinoids and the CB2 receptors have on the human immune system. Both U.S. reports on marijuana found the cannabinoids do suppress the immune system, and previously this was seen as a concern. But Dr. Niagara Cotty believes tamping down the immune system could be a good thing. Is a concern. But Dr. Niagara Cotty believes tamping down the immune system could be a good thing.
There are about 80 different autoimmune diseases, and basically autoimmune diseases are triggered by your immune system going haywire, getting hyperactivated and destroying certain cells and certain tissues.
In multiple sclerosis, for example, the immune system suddenly begins attacking the brain and the spinal cord. Rheumatoid arthritis and lupus are similar diseases caused by the chronic inflammation associated with an immune system gone amok.
The cannabinoids dampen down response to bacteria or foreign agents or injury to tissues.
A lot of scientists and researchers are interested in those properties of the cannabinoids, in trying to see how we can suppress the immune response in autoimmune disease conditions.
For Dr. Niagara Cotty, the research has gone far beyond treating inflammatory problems. He's narrowing in on the potential of cannabinoids to kill immune cells that have mutated and become cancerous. Once they become cancerous, they no longer die a normal cell death. Instead, they begin growing and spreading uncontrollably.
We were one of the first labs to demonstrate basically that not only the immune cells, the normal immune cells express these cannabinoid receptors called the CB2 receptors, but also that when these immune cells get transformed and they become cancer, to our surprise, we found that these cancer cells continue to express these CB2 receptors.
This was an exciting discovery because the CB2 receptor can act like a target for the cannabinoids. Once they bind with the receptor, they can tell the cancer cell to die.
So basically telling the cells basically to commit suicide, and that's what they do. And we demonstrated that that would be the mechanism by which the cannabinoids can kill the cancer, and therefore it can be used effectively as an anti-cancer agent.
Dr. Niagara Cotty and his researchers were able to eradicate almost 100% of the cancer in test tubes. But they were skeptical they would see similar results when they moved on to tumors in mice.
To our surprise, we found that almost 25 to 30% of the mice completely rejected the tumor. They were completely cured. And in addition, we found that the remaining mice also, there was a significant reduction in the volume or the size of the tumors as well.
The lab results have been so promising that Dr. Nagarkoti is beginning clinical trials with leukemia patients. There's no doubt in his mind that the cannabinoids, either from the plant or lab created, will play a major role in medicine in the future.
I feel that in the next 5 or 10 years, there is going to be exponential growth in cannabinoid research.
It's an area where both the critics and the advocates agree. Scientists are now well on their way to developing medicines based on the cannabinoids. It begs the question, however, will modern medicine eventually make the marijuana plant obsolete?
No, it will not. In fact, it will only enhance it. Okay, because now it's more proof that the plant really does work. Okay, and instead of spending $600 a month on buying the pharmaceutical drug, I can grow my own plants.
I don't want them to ever take the choice away because I don't know how long it's going to be before they really find out exactly what is working for me or for others. And right now, having the raw plant available is the best solution because you have all of it there. You don't have just what they've isolated, just what they've decided is important now.
Let's keep it in the corridors of science. Let's keep it in the FDA. Let's do what needs to be done, which is careful, longitudinal, placebo-controlled, crossover, head-to-head studies, and see where it falls out. But let's deliver what's really medicine. That is the individual cannabinoids.
They may come across some things that are better than herbal marijuana for one thing or another, and good luck to them. I'd love that. But I never want to see compromised the capacity of people to use herbal marijuana, whether it's because the drug that they've come up with is much more expensive, or it doesn't do as well, or whatever the reason. People should always have herbal marijuana available to them without any constraints from the law.
Patients say for now the question is irrelevant. Science has not yet given them the opportunity to choose between an effective pill or the plant.
This is something where I have no other medical alternative to treat this condition. I have exhausted all of modern medicine's alternatives, and they have really screwed my body up.
She says cannabis has allowed her to hold down 2 jobs and make plans to go back to school and finish those last credits.
There is so much promise now where there was none before.
Without the 10 to 12 cannabis cigarettes a day, I would not be working. I most likely would be on disability. I'd be homebound, and I'd be a drain on society versus a productive member of society.
The federal program that allows Irvin Rosenfeld to legally use marijuana for chronic pain was shut down in 1992. Today, he's one of a few living patients who were grandfathered in and still receive marijuana every month, courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer. Point Hatfield believes he will never gain back the muscle he lost during his cancer fight, but he got his life back. And he thinks people should not underestimate this plant just because it doesn't come with a prescription.
It's medicine. It's medicine just like aspirin is, or Zoloft, Ativan. It's a medicine.
Marijuana is here to stay. It is certainly here to stay as a medicine.
Dr. Grinspoon says the social stigma surrounding marijuana has damaged the medical research for too long. Today, he's on the advisory board for the marijuana advocacy group NORML, because he believes the only way marijuana will reach its true medical potential is if it's fully legalized. He's felt this way since the 70s, when he predicted the medical promise of cannabis would lead to a repeal of the prohibition in less than a decade.
For years, I waited for my prophecy to come true, and I despaired that I would never see it in my lifetime. And I'm 82 and I have cancer now, so I'm not sure I will, but at least I'm seeing, this boat was dead in the water for all the years I was running around testifying, so forth. Nothing. And now, since medical marijuana, wow, are we making progress.
Well, you're going straight to the heart of the issue, which really is the medical excuse movement is a means to get the camel's nose under the tent. The folks that are pushing the medical excuse movement really come from the medical legalization movement.
I think it's not helpful to brand people's motivations. It may be the case that there are some people out there who really are trying to legalize marijuana under the cloak of medicine. I don't happen to be one of them. I'm more interested in seeing if there is a medical indication here, and if there is, I think it is a social responsibility to provide that for people who are suffering.
The scientists are not here to make, like policy decisions, but our goal is to find out the truth.
To that end, the American Medical Association and the American College of Physicians have taken positions that marijuana should be moved off of Schedule I to make research on the cannabinoids easier.
We who are involved in the science sort of wish that science would become more of a dominant driver in the messaging, as opposed to politics, religion, and ignorance and fear.
I like to say it's time to have more light than heat on the subject, and clear away the smoke here.
And when it comes to getting patients to eat,
it is far and away the best medication that we have for chronic wasting and for increasing appetite in cancer patients.
There's probably nothing that works as well for appetite stimulation that we have as marijuana.
But Dr. Hensoldt says cannabis does have one side effect that certain patients don't like, namely the high.
Most of the side effects I worry about with patients are really the euphoria and the altered sense of consciousness that people get, and whether they'll tolerate that or not.
Generally, you'd consider a high as an adverse effect. So that adverse side effect for people who don't want to be high is really a problem.
For other patients, though, the high could be part of the therapeutic effect. A 1999 U.S. Institute of Medicine report on marijuana found the drug's anti-anxiety and sedative effects could be a benefit.
I can't convince myself that the psychoactive part doesn't play a part. If they feel good, that's terrific.
But does feeling good lead to addiction?
Absolutely. Marijuana is habituating, addictive, whatever you want to call it.
Dr. Voth says marijuana has about the same addictive potential as alcohol. The 1999 government report found marijuana was slightly less addictive than alcohol, with 9% of all users experiencing addiction. And marijuana does not have the extreme physical withdrawal symptoms that alcohol and other drugs do.
Potential for it.
I cannot think of one circumstance in 27 years of active practice that I've had to say, well, it's time for you to smoke dope. I just haven't. And that includes terminal patients and hospice patients.
Anyone who says that, we have adequate treatments for all of the conditions for which marijuana is purported to have some effect, I don't think that is a correct statement. I think the fact is that we have a lot of difficult to treat conditions, and there may be a niche or a place for the cannabinoids with some of those conditions.
Oncology social worker Wendy Gwenner agrees. She's personally seen patients who don't get adequate relief from the anti-nausea drugs.
You lose that balance when you remove the single most psychoactive component from the plant and use that as a pharmaceutical.
I've used Marinol on some patients selectively. I've not had any problem with Marinol.
Dr. Voth says while he's not overly impressed with Marinol, he would rather have patients take a pill. He says telling a patient to smoke an illegal plant is substandard medicine.
I treat a lot of sick patients with all sorts of different pain and neuropathic disorders and cancer, etc. And
withdrawal is really minimal because the cannabinoids are stored in fat, so that if you stop using marijuana abruptly, it still leaches out from fat over a number of days, so you don't get a precipitous withdrawal.
Regardless of the mild withdrawal symptoms, Dr. Voth believes marijuana's side effects and its addictive potential are just a few of the factors that make it unattractive for drug companies to research.
I think it's very unlikely that marijuana will ever make it through the FDA. It's the fact that you're smoking dope, that you're smoking a plant. You're smoking something with 488 substances in it. So there's the rub. Schedule 1 is a side issue. It may chill things a little, but it's really that you're looking at smoking dope as a medication.